Hey everybody, Coldar here. Today we are looking at Amber Shaper Unsock in Heart of Fear on normal difficulty. So this is a cool fight. Basically, there's 3 phases. The first phase, you're just dealing with Amber Shaper himself and all his abilities. Second phase, you're dealing with Amber Shaper and his abilities plus a large monstrosity that will spawn. And the final phase, you're back to just the Amber Shaper himself. But he's real pissed, and he's trying to take it out on you because he hates his parents or something like that. So in that sense, I'm just going to split up the video into 3 sections here, and we'll go over each phase, and then we'll talk about the transitions and how it all comes together. So as you begin the encounter, facing just Amber Shaper himself, he will immediately start using his core abilities that you'll have to deal with throughout the fight, and they sort of shape the encounter as a whole and just kind of give you an idea of what you're meant to be doing throughout the fight. So the first ability is Amber Scalpel, and this is cast on a random raid member every 50 seconds, and it prefers range targets, and it will chase that player with an amber beam, dealing around 120,000 damage per second to that target if they actually touch the beam. So that player just simply needs to react quickly and start running away. Now, where they run is not too important. Simply running out from the raid location is the best. So you don't want to run through any other raid members and have them take damage from the beam. While this is being channeled for 10 seconds, they will also be spawning small little pools of amber in the location that the beam traveled. These deal a bit of damage if anyone stands in them every second, but not a huge amount. However, there should be no reason anyone's standing in them, so it's irrelevant really. The important thing about Amber Scalpel is that it will cause 4 living ambers to spawn during the 10-second duration. These are key to the fight, and when they appear, they will fixate on a random raid member and just continue to melee that player for really low damage until they're killed. However, they have a few other abilities as well. So while a living amber is active, they will be doing an aura to the entire raid that deals around 3,000 damage every tick. And in addition, when they die, they deal around 70,000 damage in a short radius around them, 8 yards, as well as heal any other living amber for a percentage of their health that are within an 8-yard radius. So, while you want to kill living ambers pretty quickly, you don't want to AE them, group up and AE them down, because when one dies, it'll just heal the next, or the others that are there, and so on and so forth. So you want to spread out somewhat. The best method we found for dealing with these was to have 1 or 2 DPS assigned to killing them. So in our case, our balanced druid would typically be assigned to this, and she would just focus on them one at a time and burn them down, while the player that's being attacked pretty much ignores them. Now that's not a set rule, because if you are a melee DPS, for example, and you're being attacked by one, you're going to be busy trying to attack the boss or something else, and if there are multiple ambers in melee range, you don't want to kill yours and have it heal the other living amber that might be located nearby. So if there's only 1 living amber in the melee group, you can kill it there. But often, if you're a melee, you just want to step out to a safe distance and kill it by yourself. So just something to keep in mind. Generally, ranged DPS can ignore their amber, but melee DPS should probably focus it themselves. So as for positioning, that is somewhat important. This video footage is from the achievement, which is not really the purpose of this video, but it does illustrate an important point. You want to try to kill living ambers kind of in a centralized location, somewhere that when they die, they will leave these pools on the ground, and you want as many pools in one area as possible because of the mechanics of the final phase, which we'll talk about in a moment. But essentially, the goal here is to make sure when you are attacked by living amber, you are within a designated location that's okay to kill things in. So for us, we would generally kill things within this shape in the center here, this indented section. And then in the last phase, everything is close enough together that we can make use of the pools that are around this area. So, yeah, as I mentioned, this footage here is from the achievement, so we're stacking these pools up pretty much on top of each other, which is not necessary if you're just killing this for the first time, not doing the achievement. But that said, the general idea of keeping things close together is a good practice. So while you don't necessarily need to stack the pools on top of each other when you kill Amber, you should keep them bunched up as much as possible. And this will help you a great deal later in the fight. So that's the Living Ambers, Scalpel, all that good stuff. Now, the main mechanic that everyone in the raid will have to deal with that you first get on this first phase is called Reshape Life. And this is cast every 50 seconds on initially the current tank of. So as a tank transforms via Reshape Life, they'll be converted into a mutated construct, which is just an amber monster creature. And it's basically a vehicle, so they will gain a set of new abilities and they'll control the construct from inside. Now, while they're transformed, the use of these abilities will be extremely important in succeeding in this fight. During the first phase, which lasts from 100% to 70% life for Amber Shaper himself, only tanks will be eligible Reshape Life targets. So the first target will be the current tank, and then as soon as that player is converted, the other tank should taunt immediately. And then after 50 seconds, Reshape Life will be cast again, this time on the other tank that was tanking at the time, and this will go back and forth. So initially, just your tanks will be dealing with construct abilities. However, in the second phase of the fight, the one that lasts the longest by far, everyone except the tanks is eligible to be targeted randomly. So at some point in the fight, or at least while you're practicing this, everyone in your raid will need to know how to deal with being a construct, what the abilities do, when to use them, all that stuff. So it's really important that you prepare and have everyone aware of what it is they might be expected to do as a construct, when to use what abilities and all that stuff. So to that end, I'll talk about what the tanks are doing at the beginning, and then we'll transition into the second phase and talk about how it changes for non-tank players in that phase. So when a new construct spawns, it will start out with 100 willpower, or energy as I'll refer to it from now on. So this energy automatically drains at a rate of 2 energy per second. So if no other factor was counted, this would mean that the energy would drain completely within 50 seconds. If a construct is allowed to reach 0 energy at any point, it will immediately kill the player that is controlling it, and the construct itself will become a normal NPC uncontrolled by anyone and will attack the raid randomly. And if that happens, you need to kill it quickly because it will do a lot of damage to you if you don't. However, that should not be a factor. You'd never want a player in a construct to die. So to prevent this, you need to allow that player to use the ability called Break Free. This is usable only when a construct is below 20% maximum health, at which point their Break Free ability, which is the number 4 on their hotbar, will become active, and they can use that at any time to just break themselves out of the construct form. It will kill the construct at whatever health it had at that point, and they can just freely go back to their normal form, basically just as a player. So you need to deal enough damage to get the construct below 20% within the time frame before it drains its energy on its own. However, the rate of this energy drain is not just 50 seconds because there are other abilities going on. So the main one is every 13 seconds that a construct is alive, it will automatically start to cast Amber Explosion. And this is a 2.5 second cast time AE effect that does around 225,000 nature damage to everyone in the raid, if this is allowed to complete. So, while not necessarily something that will one-shot people, it's important that you handle it and interrupt it every time, because otherwise it's a huge amount of AE damage you don't want to deal with. So to deal with this, the player within the construct that's controlling it can use their number 2 ability called Struggle for Control. And what this does is it will use 8 willpower or energy of the current energy for the construct and stun the construct for a few seconds. It's just a short duration stun, but if it's cast during an amber explosion, it will stun that cast time and prevent the explosion from going off. However, since this occurs every 13 seconds and costs 8 energy, this changes the total lifespan of a properly controlled construct from 50 seconds down to 38, 39 or so. So you have to DPS down a construct below 20% within that 38-second time frame. And if you don't do so, the player will not be able to break free and they'll die. So how you do this is really just focus most, if not all, of your DPS on freshly spawned constructs right away. You might be able to have one player that's assigned to living ambers avoid DPSing the construct, but everyone else needs to react very quickly and immediately start DPSing it down. Once it's below 20% health, however, you need to stop. You don't want to actually kill it because that will also kill the player inside if they don't break free in time. So you want to stop just below 20% or just above even and let dots get them lower. And then that player can stay in the construct as long as possible before their energy is about to fade, at which point they'll use break free on their own. So the next most important ability for a construct is its number 1 hotkey, and that is Amber Strike. So Amber Strike is really your primary attack other than white hits. And basically what it does is it's got a 6-second cooldown, but it will hit the current target in melee range for about 350,000 nature damage. But more importantly, it will stack a stacking debuff on that target that increases all damage taken by 10% per stack. And this can go up to 99 stacks and it lasts 15 seconds. In addition, it also interrupts spellcasting, such as Amber Explosions, which I'll talk about in a moment, which is important on phase 2 basically. But the goal right now is simply to utilize Amber Strike as often as possible on Amber Shaper himself and get the stacks of the debuff, which is called Destabilize, stacked up. So obviously if you can get this stack going, you're going to have a lot more DPS on the boss and get through the phase a lot faster. The final ability is Consume Amber, and this is your number 3 hotkey. So this one will basically allow a construct to consume a pool of amber that was left over from killing a living amber if they're standing on top of that pool. It will regenerate 20 willpower or energy, but also increase the current and maximum health of the construct by 2 million. So it's about a 20% gain for health and energy is the way to look at it. So this may seem wasteful, but it turns out that using this properly is actually a great way to take advantage of the Destabilize debuff that is applied from Amber Strike. And this has to do with the timing of spawning new constructs, how long the debuff lasts, how long a construct can stay alive, all that good stuff. So I'll try to explain that as best I can here. So as I mentioned, because a construct's normal lifespan is around 38 or 39 seconds, and because the cooldown of the Reshape Life ability that converts a new player into a construct is 50 seconds, there's going to be a 11 to 12 second gap from the time a previous construct despawns and the next one is even alive to keep stacking up Destabilize. And because when you use Amber Strike on a target, Destabilize only lasts 15 seconds, that'll only give the new construct player a window of about 2 to 3 seconds after they're getting converted to get into melee range and use Amber Strike on their target. and this is almost impossible to do, and certainly impossible to do reliably. It's just not enough time. So instead, what you'll need to do is extend the lifespan of a construct to increase that time gap and allow for more time for the new construct player to get into range and keep that destabilize stack going up, keep it active. So the easiest way to do this is to have each constructed player consume one pool of amber in their lifespan at one point. Now, because it gives you 20 energy, you don't want to consume a pool right away when you're at 90 energy, say, because you'll waste energy, right? You won't gain it. So you need to wait until you're at least at 80 energy or below before you consume a pool. The best suggestion that we came up with is to interrupt your first Amber Explosion cast, which is 13 seconds after you spawn. So you'll be at, let's see, what is that, 74 energy. So you interrupt that, and then use 8 more energy from that interrupt, but then you can run over and get a pool, gain your health, and gain your 20 energy. And by doing this, you'll actually extend your lifespan as a construct by 9 seconds because of the way it works out with self-interrupts. So with that 9-second extension, if you are able to use Amber Strike on the boss just 1 or 2 seconds before you have to leave, now your lifespan has gone up to 47 or 48 seconds. And this means only 3, 4, 5 seconds later will the next construct spawn, giving them a good safe window of around 10 seconds to get into melee range and use Amber Strike once again. And this will keep the destabilized stack climbing up. So it's somewhat complicated to get used to, but it will greatly increase the speed at which you do this fight because your damage will go much higher as that stack continues. So the best way to do it is to practice it in the first phase when it's just 2 players. It's your tanks going back and forth. Things will be a lot more difficult in the second phase when you're trying to do this and dealing with the monstrosity. So again, practice it with your tanks, and then they can share that information with the rest of the raid about how they find it to work and all that. But the goal here, again, is to keep that destabilized stack continuously going by consuming 1 living amber pool during the lifespan of your construct. And then just refreshing that destabilized stack just before you have to leave because you're about to run out of energy at the end. And that will help you a lot. So let's go ahead and transition into the second phase, which starts at 70% health for Amber Shaper. And we'll talk about the monstrosity and what it adds to the fight. So as you begin the second phase, the Amber Monstrosity will appear, and this will rush toward the raid. So your currently active tank will need to quickly pick it up and hold it for a while. You can split the boss and the monstrosity between your tanks, or you can just have them on the same tank. But the important thing here is that one of the monstrosity's abilities is Fling, which basically throws his current target toward a random raid member, dealing damage to everyone that gets hit and stunning them. So your current tank that's on the monstrosity will get stunned, and they may take a lot of extra damage if they're attacked while they're stunned. So you may want to have your tanks swap targets when that occurs. Otherwise, monstrosity just uses a massive stomp attack every once in a while, which does AE damage, around 150,000 physical, and does a knockback to anyone that's within about 15 yards of him. So generally speaking, try to stay out of 15-yard range if you are a ranged player, and you can do so that you don't take that extra damage and get knocked away. But melee and tanks will just have to deal with it pretty much. Other than that, the main effect for the monstrosity is Amber Explosion, just like you dealt with from the constructs that were converted players as well. So, in addition to all the normal abilities from the Amber Shaper himself on this first phase, you'll also get those plus the monstrosity stuff in the second phase. So you still have players being chased by the beam, you still have living ambers spawning, and you still have Reshape Life converting players into constructs every 50 seconds. So those converted players now have to interrupt their own amber explosion every 13 seconds using their number 2 struggle for control ability, but then they have to utilize the secondary benefit of Amber Strike, their number 1 attack ability, on the monstrosity when it casts Amber Explosion. So the good news is that the monstrosity only casts Amber Explosion about every 46, 47 seconds or so. So it's pretty infrequent. But essentially every player that gets turned into a construct during the second phase will likely have to interrupt one monstrosity cast, one Amber Explosion from it. And you do this by simply casting Amber Strike when it casts Amber Explosion, and this will interrupt the cast. The problem is you have to manage the cooldown, since it has a 6-second cooldown every time you hit it, so that you're not sitting there with your cooldown going and unable to actually interrupt the cast. So getting used to how this all works is the most challenging part, and this second phase is by far the most difficult because of that. Because not only is it non-tanks that are converted during this phase, but everyone will need a way to practice this and get enough time to get used to the timings of everything. So generally speaking, you should utilize your boss mods or just make your own that will give you an indication of when the casts are going to occur, so the players in the construct know exactly what's happening. So I'll try to remember to include links to some weak orders that we made for this purpose that give you timings for when your own explosion will go off every 13 seconds and when the next monstrosity explosion will occur as well. But most boss mods will have that stuff by now, I think. So, yeah, the only other goal here is to focus all DPS on the monstrosity. This is because during the second phase, the Amber Shaper takes 99% reduced damage, so pretty much pointless to attack him. And instead, you have to burn the monstrosity as fast as possible, which will then force the fight to go into the third phase. So, just like with the first phase where you're attacking just Amber Shaper, you want to try to have people continue the stacks of Destabilize. So, if at all possible, have players extend their lifespan by consuming one puddle, just like they were doing in the first phase, when they're below 80 energy, while keeping track of the timing on the boss explosion and their own explosion. And then otherwise, they're spamming their number 1 ability on the monstrosity at all times to get that Destabilize stack as high as possible. So you see there, we screwed it up here, but the idea is to keep that stack going on the monstrosity. And if you do so, it will essentially lower the total time spent in this phase around 40% or so. And this is just because it adds that much extra damage, and then the debuff also adds damage on top of that just from the hits itself. So it's a huge benefit to do that if you can manage it. It's not required if everyone just gets to 3 stacks or something during their construct phase, manages the explosions, but then doesn't get the stacks to carry over. It's okay. It just means this phase will be a little bit longer. So keep that in mind. So yeah, it can be somewhat hectic though. But again, just practice, practice, practice. Everyone has to do it and know what they're doing. And the sooner they can get everyone to get into this phase and try it out, the sooner they'll get used to it. And then you'll be in the clear for the rest of the fight. So, like I said, once you get the monstrosity dead, then the third phase starts. So let's go ahead and go into that one. So, as you begin the third phase, Amber Shaper will run to the center of the room and activate the pools all around the room. There's 4 pools there. This will cause volatile amber to occur. which basically causes the pools to erupt and constantly shoot out bolts of amber that hit everyone randomly, pretty much. So it does around 45,000 damage when it hits a player. You can't really do anything to prevent this damage, so you just need to use your healing and survival cooldowns when this phase begins. And the damage from that will not really ramp up that much, but Amber Shaper himself also gains a buff called Concentrated Mutation that increases his damage dealt and attack speed by 50% each. So, the challenge here is that throughout this phase, rather than reshape life every 50 seconds, as was the case in the first two phases, instead it occurs every 15 seconds on a random raid member. And this is anybody's eligible. Tanks, healers, DPS, doesn't matter. So you can see there's tons of people constructed, and this will just keep going up every 15 seconds. So there's some random elements to it. You know, you could have your tanks and your healers get converted really early, and then you'd be screwed. We've had a few attempts where both tanks got converted, and he couldn't do anything really. The boss was just going crazy. We've also had some where both healers get converted pretty early on. So there are some random elements to it, but overall, you will not get too unlucky. And what that means is that as this phase continues, you'll have more and more people turn into constructs, and they need to keep themselves alive while interrupting their own amber explosion. Again, every 13 seconds, hit your number 2 ability, and you'll interrupt that. But throughout this, your energy is being drained. Again, it goes down 2 energy every second, plus the 8 energy every 13 from interrupting yourself. So you have to manage your energy levels, and every 15 seconds, a new person is added to the mix that also has to manage their energy. So basically this means that all the puddles that were left from living amber throughout the first 2 stages of the fight are now going to be consumed to keep everyone alive and in their construct form. The good news is that the bolts from volatile amber that deal damage to players will actually heal mutated construct players. So as this phase progresses, it's actually easier to heal because there will be fewer people that are taking actual damage. So that makes it a lot easier. But you need to have enough pools on the floor to allow everyone to stay alive and keep their energy levels high enough. And it's important that everyone does this so that you can spam number 1, Amber Strike, and get those destabilized stacks really high. And you'll do a lot of damage every time you hit him as these stacks get higher and higher. So it will feel like you're not really doing anything to his health, and then suddenly it will just spike and it'll just drop really rapidly. So you just need to hold on until that point and make sure your pools are well managed. So this is one reason why I talked about in the beginning, keeping the pools in a central location is important, because if players have to spend a lot of time walking from the boss location out to a pool far away, chances are their number 1 attack, Amber Strike, will come off cooldown and be available, but they'll be running out to get a pool and wasting all this time. So the closer that the pools are together, the closer the tank can move the boss, and then the shorter the distance that players as constructs actually have to move to get puddles and consume to keep their energy up. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in this fight. It's pretty bizarre, but it's kind of fun. And again, it's just all about practicing being that construct pretty much. So let's go ahead and walk through the whole thing. You can see it's actually pretty short in its entirety. And I'll kind of walk through what we're doing. So I know the video doesn't start quite at the beginning. I apologize for that, but close enough. You get the idea. So the first scalpel goes out, and we've got Living Amber. So right away, you can just have DPS start attacking those if you want. Shortly after that, the first Reshape Life will be cast on the current tank. So you can see the top left of the screen is the construct for our first tank, which is our monk tank. And DPS are starting to burn him down. And once he gets below 80 energy, he consumes one of the puddles that's on the ground. And this is just to keep his lifespan going, as I talked about before. Otherwise, we're just pushing him below 20%, and we actually do a little bit too much damage and get him kind of scary low. So he probably has to come out a little bit early. Well, maybe not. It looks like he was okay. But just be careful of that. You don't want to, as I said, kill him or get them too low that they have to come out earlier than necessary. So just as he's coming out, a few seconds later, the second Reshape Life occurs. And it's important that your other tank taunt immediately so that a tank that is turned into a construct is not taking damage from the boss. The reason for this is that the boss will use Destroy Will on that player, which basically drains 40 willpower instantly from them. So if the boss is attacking a construct, it's bad. Their lifespan will go down really quickly. So just make sure your taunts are very quick. The other ability I should mention that occurs in the first and second phase that I haven't talked about yet is basically to do with healing, and it's called Parasitic Growth. So this is cast on a random raid member, and it's a 30-second debuff. It'll just be on one person at a time, and it's kind of annoying, but cool mechanic. So basically, it does damage over time to that player, around 25,000 every tick, every 2 seconds. But the damage dealt is increased based on the amount of healing they receive while the debuff is active. So the goal here is when a new player gets Parasitic Growth, they should immediately blow survival cooldowns and damage mitigation cooldowns on themselves to lower that damage taken so that the actual healers don't have to heal that player directly for as long as possible. Ideally, you want them to last 15, 20, maybe 25 seconds before you have to directly heal them at all. And by then, the healing increase to the dot damage will be pretty low, and you won't have to worry about it. In some rare cases, you might have a player that gets the debuff and they're low health already, and this can be scary. So try to use abilities that will lower that damage and allow you to heal them as late as possible. So again, that occurs on the first and second phase, so you just need to be aware of that. Especially in the second phase when one of your healers might be converted to a construct, and therefore you'll only have one healer active at the time, unless you're using 3 healers. But there isn't that much damage on this fight, so I think you can get away with 2 pretty easily. Anyway, so as you can see, we're into the second phase pretty heavily on the monstrosity. And I should talk a little bit about the transition period for the monstrosity phase. As I mentioned, the monstrosity uses his explosion around every 46, 47 seconds. So what this means is after he spawns, his first explosion will occur after that 46-second wait. But the Reshape Life timing may not line up correctly. So if you don't time it correctly, what can happen is the downtime between construct targets in the second phase can occur when the boss is using Amber Explosion, and therefore you won't be able to interrupt it with someone's Amber Strike. So if you find this is happening, then in the first phase, hold off on DPS on the boss, on Amber Shaper, until he's basically got someone constructed and they've been active for at least 10, 15 seconds. Then you push the boss over 70%, and then the timing will work out just fine when the second phase begins. So it's just a matter of what your raid DPS is. There isn't really a set rule to it. But if you have that problem, again, just wait at 72% health or so, and then once someone has been a construct for 15 seconds or so, then push them over. Yeah. So we're getting the monstrosity down. We don't manage to continue the stacks on him on Destabilize that well, so it's taking a little bit longer than our initial kill on this fight, but still, that is the goal here. We just made some mistakes on it. And he's about to die, though. So you can see it goes by pretty quick. It's not that long of a fight, to be honest. And now we're into the third phase. So we're just going to put everyone in the middle. If you can, try to have everyone stack up behind the boss. And generally, you're going to have one player that remains a construct during the transition between the second phase and this final phase. So you can see in the back there, it's our enhancement shaman. So if that's the case, just have them remain a construct. Don't have people DPS them down if you notice the timing is going to end up like that. And they can just stay as a construct, consume a bunch of pools on the ground, and then just get the stacks going on the Amber Shaper. From here, as I said, people are just going to get converted, and you just last as long as you can using the pools and interrupting yourself while spamming your number one ability. And you should have enough DPS to finish it off. Also, this is a good time for DPS cooldowns just as you're entering the phase. And Bloodlust and all that will help you burn them down a little bit more. Now, as a final last resort, if this phase is giving you a lot of trouble, you can actually stack Destabilize on the boss before this phase occurs, and then continue it into this phase. So this is sort of an advanced tactic, and you probably won't need it, but if necessary, you can do so. So basically what you would do is save up a bunch of pools on the ground, more than you might need, probably by extending the first phase. And then once you get to the end of the second phase, have one player remain a construct, don't have them killed, and start stacking Amber Strike debuffs on the boss, on Amber Shaper. They won't take damage since the 99% debuff will be active, but he'll get stacks, and then you can continue that so you can start the third phase with 10, 15 plus stacks on him. Anyway, that is Amber Shaper on Sock Normal. It's pretty challenging, but a cool fight, so good luck, and thanks.